Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Rosemary Ndlovu. We are heading to South Africa, guys. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! A shout out to my gal pal Amanda. She is born and raised in South Africa and has very kindly helped me with a lot of the words in this case, but I can't do it how she does it. It's fantastic. It sounds amazing and it sounds really beautiful. And then I'm like, no, I just can't do it. So I'll try my best. But a big thank you to her because she has helped me with a lot of the words. I'm going to call Rosemary by her first name because the amount of times I'm going to say her name and I cannot say her surname properly, it's just going to be annoying. So we're going to call her Rosemary. She was born in 1978 and she was born and raised in Johannesburg. She was described as being quite masculine, quite harsh, and when she grew up, she trained to become a police officer. And she trained and she worked really hard and she was very, very good at it. She was actually promoted eventually to being a sergeant. So she did really well in her career. In 2011, Rosemary would meet Maurice Mabasa. He worked for the US Embassy and he was a really kind soul, very kind soul. He would spend a large majority of his wages on supporting his elderly mother and his 13 siblings, and they were living in poverty. So he would help them out financially an awful lot. And you know they say opposites attract. Well, yeah, I mean, okay, this feels miles apart here, but Rosemary was quite the opposite. She had quite a large family herself and an elderly mother, and she did not share her wealth at all. In fact, quite the opposite. She would spend the majority of her money on herself, and to be honest, I think the main reason for that was that she did have a gambling addiction. I was going to say suffered with a gambling addiction. I don't really know the terminology because I don't know a lot about gambling addictions. I imagine that is why she spent a lot of money on herself, i.e. the gambling. But from reading between the lines, she also would just spend an awful lot of money on materialistic things, making herself look good, trying to get people to like her and things like that. But she didn't spend any money on her, or very little, on her poverty-stricken family. She did, however, convince many members of her family to take out life insurance policies. It seemed like a really sensible thing to do because, like I said, they lived in poverty and the chances of them dying and passing away was quite high in the area that they lived in statistically, which is really, really sad, isn't it? So they did agree it did make sense for them to take out these insurance policies, and she offered to pay for those insurance policies and to file all the necessary paperwork for her family members. She filed a number of insurance policies, one of which was for a cousin called Homu. However, first red flag, on his insurance policy, her cousin, she put down that she was his wife, and she wasn't. A few months later, in March of 2012, Homu would disappear. Homu was a family man, and it was very out of character for him to not return, and he was very greatly missed. Rosemary, being part of the police force, she started a search for her cousin as soon as she found out that he was missing, and sadly the search would not go on for very long because his body was found quite quickly somewhere called Olifantsfontein. What a place name. I mean, I just like that. That is an amazing word. Olifantsfontein. I love that. Olifantsfontein. Yes. His autopsy would show that he died as a result of blunt force trauma to his head. And super sadly, because his death, his murder, was just one of many in the area, it wasn't really investigated. The police force and investigators just did not have the time, money and resources to focus on his murder, which is just awful, isn't it? But that's what happened. Rosemary had taken out a life insurance policy and she had put her name as his wife on this documentation, and it wasn't looked into. It just paid out. So Rosemary was then the beneficiary of this life insurance policy. And this is where you start to get an insight into her character, because she paid almost nothing towards Homu's funeral. Literally, so the family were just very poor. She'd taken out this life insurance policy, and the only person that was now benefiting from that was herself. And she was working. She was the one that had an income and money, and her family didn't. And I don't know how they paid for his funeral, but she did contribute very, very little towards it. And this made her family incredibly sad. I mean, you'd just feel duped, wouldn't you? Oh, I'll take out these life insurance policies, and then literally none of you benefit but me. Like, that's not good. Just over a year later, in June 2013, Rosemary invited her sister, one of her sisters, Audrey, over for a meal. The following day, Rosemary called the police because she hadn't heard from her sister. Like, she'd gone home, she hadn't heard from her. And this was like, she was worried. So the police went round to Audrey's, and they found Audrey's body. Now, it would turn out in her autopsy that Audrey had been poisoned and then strangled in her own home. Like, just horrific. But guess who had a life insurance policy on her sister Audrey? You've guessed it. Ding, ding, ding. Rosemary. And again, very tragically and sadly, this case was not investigated. They just did not have the money or the manpower to investigate her murder. In 2014, Rosemary would give birth to a daughter called Makanani, and her relationship with Maurice was not fantastic. It was not good, and the baby just put a lot of strain on an already strained relationship. It wasn't unusual for Maurice and her to argue and fall out, and for him to leave their home and go and spend the night somewhere else. That was a normal thing. They argued a lot. And then one night he did that very thing, but he never came home. It's an interesting case, this one, because you just know what's coming, don't you? It's almost like I don't need to tell you the story. You just know. I could just say a name and you'd be like, oh, yeah. Again, Rosemary would call the police the next day to say that he hadn't come home, this was unlike him, and report somebody else missing again. Oh, surprise, surprise, that very day, his body was found next to a quiet road, and, well, he had over 80 stab wounds. Oh. Life insurance again. Yes, she had an insurance policy on Maurice. So is that 3 now? Yeah, I think so. Homu, her sister Audrey, and Maurice. So 3 times. So her name has been on 3 life insurance policies. And this is where it gets spicy and infuriating. This one pisses me off. I mean, it's all just tragic and sad, but this got me. So, in 2016, June, a niece of hers, Zinelli, she came to stay for a few weeks, and if this was a film, you'd be like, no, do not stay, just go, no, don't do that, don't stay with this woman. She stays with her for a few weeks, and sadly, in this few weeks, and I believe this was purely an accident, and how, like, just what, but it gave Rosemary ideas, didn't it? So sadly, Zinelli was hit by a car. She was run over. So she went to the hospital. Rosemary took her to the hospital. So they went to the hospital this one day, and she was seen and she was looked over, and it was just bumps and bruises. So it wasn't a huge collision, and she didn't have any broken bones, or I don't even think she had any sort of cuts or lesions or anything. She just had bruises and was a bit sore, and they gave her a thorough looking over, and they determined that she could go home that same day. So she was okay. They just went to check her out. The next morning she would be back in hospital, this time not breathing, and it would seem that just overnight her minor bumps and bruises had morphed into broken ribs and broken bones and massive internal injuries. How horrific is that? That's just, And the hospital were absolutely certain. They were very sure that this had not been the case the day before. They were adamant. And they just could not understand it whatsoever. And there was like talk of, I don't know, had she gotten up in the night and fallen down the stairs or something? Like, they didn't know, and they couldn't explain what had happened, and neither could Rosemary. And, that's a shame. We don't know. And she died. She died of these horrific, like, internal injuries. God only knows how they were inflicted, but it just, that just felt dark. That was dark. Again, life insurance policy. Again, not investigated. After Zanelli's death, and this just, I want to bop her on the head, Rosemary then became very close with Zanelli's brother, Myeni. Run for the hills. Sadly, no. And one day she offered him a lift somewhere. Again, the same thing happened again. She called to say he was missing, and they found his body the next day. Again, life insurance policy, and just no investigation. But this time, the insurance company were a bit more switched on about it, and they were more thorough, and they basically asked for proof, because this time again she had said that she was married or in a relationship with Myeni, and therefore that's why she should have all of the insurance money. And they said, can you prove it, like prove your relationship to him? And she couldn't, so they didn't pay out. Oh, that must have stung. Good. Any family members that go near Rosemary are literally in trouble, aren't they? We continue, sadly. In 2017, April, I believe, Rosemary's nephew, Brilliant, I love that name, he would go missing. Phone records would show, and this suggests that they looked into this case a little more, but phone records would show that Rosemary was with Brilliant the whole day, or most of the day, before he went missing. This time, she had 3 life insurance policies taken out on Brilliant, and she'd put herself down this time as his mother. And again, she couldn't prove that relationship, and so she didn't get a single payout again. Now, that's happened twice. She's got to be pissed. And she was. So in 2018, she is now desperate for money, and she enlists the help of a man called Njaba Kanene. And he is a hitman. And this time she goes too far. Too far even for a hitman. So when she hires him, she discusses with him what she would like him to do, and she would like him to murder her sister Joyce and her 5 children. And the youngest of those 5 children is only 6 months old. What a bitch. Now, this is the first time that we know definitely that Rosemary has a part to play. Like I say, I mean, it's obvious, but, this is the first time that we're like, oh, she actually says it out loud. Kanene, what a name. Love it. Oliphants, Fontaine and Kanene. I like saying those. Kanene is horrified. He is horrified, and he actually goes to the police. So without her knowing, and he tells them everything. He tells them what she's asked him to do. So they wire his car and him, and they say, right, just get the information out of her, because then we've got her, like, get this information. So they set up a situation, a ruse, where he invites Rosemary to join him on a little trip out to her sister's house, so that he can confirm which house it is for sure, so he doesn't kill the wrong family. And he wants to discuss the terms and what exactly it is that she would like done. Very clever. And it's pretty dark. It's dark. I shall read out a few quotes about what she said about what she would like done to her sister and her 5 children, youngest one being 6 months old. Okay. So this quote, you can go in, strangle them and burn them, but don't stab or shoot them. That's not done in the villages. You see, setting them alight. Flipping heck. I mean, it's just sad that is a thing anyway. But so she wants to make it look like it was just a random attack that's seen in villages. So strangling and burning. She then goes on to discuss that she could arrange to meet her sister and say that she's got these tablets that help with the flu and that she could give them to her and the family so that they would fall asleep. Basically sort of drug them so that they're drowsy and unable to then fight back. Awfulness. She then goes on to talk about how she's got herself an alibi already and things like that. So, she spills the beans. She was arrested shortly after showing the hitman her sister's house. Overall, she took about £65,000, the equivalent of that, which I think is about 90... What? I was going to say 90. What is numbers? Hello? $90,000 is because I was thinking of dollars and not pounds, and then I just brain fart. That's an awful lot of money, isn't it? 1.4 million rand. She was put on trial for all 6 of the murders in her family and her partner, Maurice. And they're just annoyingly, there was not a lot of evidence, really, because none of the cases had been investigated. So they were really fighting against the tide. So it took 3 years to bring her to trial. That would take us to the 22nd of October in 2021. She was a right character. She, at first, was quite frivolous, silly almost, like a show-off, like a bit of a show-off in court. She was posing for pictures, being a bit of she was a douche, loving on herself a bit, just generally enjoying the attention. And then when things got serious and her family and colleagues, I think they had over 49 witnesses, or what do you call them? What do you call them? People that would testify against her. A lot. And as evidence started to mount up against her, she got spicy. She got, she wasn't a happy bunny. She crossed. She was found guilty and she was sentenced to 6 life sentences. And I think she had some other sentences as well for just other things, like another 10 years for this and that. They loaded it on. And rightly so, because, what? She just used... it's so callous and cold, isn't it? That's always the words, callous, cold. Just mad. Like she just saw her own family members as a means to get money for her gambling addiction and lifestyle. It's just beggars belief, doesn't it? And she didn't show any remorse for it. It wasn't like she was crying tears of sadness and weeping because her gambling addiction just had her so hard that she had no other choice and she had to do it, even though that is not an excuse. But that was not how she was. She wasn't even like that. She was just like, oh, okay. At one point, I think she asked for forgiveness from her family, and then in the next breath, she said she wasn't guilty. So, and that was it. There was no other, remorse or anything at all. What a bird. Thank goodness that Kanene was like, oh, no thanks. And he didn't fancy the job because it was him that... He saved their family, didn't he? He's a bad man because he was a hitman. So he's probably killed loads of other people. But he did save the life of her sister Joyce and her 5 children. So I suspect she's very thankful for that. Oh, I've lost all feeling in my buttocks. And it's very sad for the 6 family members that were not so lucky. And that is all I have for you on today's case. Not sure about my gin today. It's got a syrup, like a cocktail syrup in it. Looks nice. Tastes not too bad. But it was confusing when I made this drink because the syrups are normally like a thick liquid. Really itchy nose. But this was like treacle. And I thought, has something gone wrong with it? I don't know. It was called Highland Sling. Sorry. Ching ching. Nothing much to report for you all this week. I haven't burnt myself, fallen over, done anything crazy. I'm quite tired. Don't know if you can tell. My youngest son just has a vendetta against my sleep this week. Gin will help. Thanks as always for all of your wonderful comments. I love having a chit chat, and Yeah, thank you. I like it. And a lot of the time I'm laughing out loud, randomly just like walking along. I walked into a bin. Something did happen. I was walking along the road and my phone pinged and I looked at it and the sun was it was in my eyes, had my sunnies on, but it was in my eyes. It's very bright. And I walked straight into a bin. I like folded myself over it, like a proper like that, and then straight away looked around. Oh, because it was like, and I swore as well, and it was on the school run. Imagine that. Like, babe. Honestly, luckily, we're always quite late. So there wasn't many children. I don't think there was any children around. I don't think anyone saw. But then I was almost like gutted because you would definitely giggle. If you saw someone do that, you'd giggle, wouldn't you? So it's like wasted. No one saw it. I giggled after that. It was funny. Like straight over the bin. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me again this week. I do hope you can join me next week for a glass or a vase or a mug or a jug or a bowl or a mug of gin. Who knows? Please pop some different vessels in the comments below. I'll incorporate them into my cheerio. Oh, did that rhyme? Oh my God, I'm darling. I think the Highland Sing is, it's good. It's going to my brain. Quickly. Anyway, I'm going to go before I embarrass myself, if that's possible, because I don't care. Who cares? You can't care. You've got to laugh at yourself. Falling over bins, rhyming when you don't mean to, being a knobber. Just all of a sudden, this beautiful gin is just sparking, like in my brain. Like, boom, boom, boom. Not gonna lie, it feels quite nice. Needed a bit of like shaking loose this week. I'm going to love you and leave you. I love you all very much. Oh, by the way, you are brilliant. You know, I wasn't drunk. I thought people might think I was drunk, but I posted like, my subscribers are better than yours. I hope you read it like that. My subscribers are better than yours because you are. And I mean, what's with the singing? But yeah, that's how excited I am because now I'm a little drunk, but I was not when I posted that. I was just feeling so much love. I get such wonderful comments and you're all really funny and it's just so honestly genuinely nice to chit chat with you and I love it. We are a beautiful community of sinners. Don't ever forget that you are brilliant and I love you and I think you're fantastic. Yes. Anyway, I am going to go now. Have a wonderful weekend and I will see you next week for another true crime story. Be good. Or not. Be you. Bye.